Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is the 14th of May, 2025. This is the A block, which means we start it right around 7 o'clock, a little bit after the news and all that kind of stuff. John, do you hear me?
Brad, it is so great to hear you on this newfangled technology.
Wow, it actually works. Unbelievable. Okay, before I go any further, I want to thank Jason Rosenbaum because Jason has been, I guess you call it tailing John Combest, and he's taken some excellent pictures of, first off, Jason took the picture of John working to get rid of the traffic calming islands on Clarkson. John's out there in his orange safety vest. And then, just yesterday, John was out doing, with his Geiger counter, doing radioactive testing at the airport. And once again, Jason Rosenbaum took an excellent picture of John on the north side of the airport. You can see the planes in the background and the tower and the whole bit. That Jason Rosenbaum, man, when you get a construction vest on, he just can't keep away from anybody, can he?
When lawmakers pass legislation stating who can and cannot use AI, the first person I think of is Brad Hildebrand. Who thought it was a good idea to give Brad Hildebrand AI tools?
You don't like my AI work?
I'm not on Facebook, Brad, so I don't see your boomer Facebook posts about me.
Well, I put them on Twitter as well, too.
I unfollowed you on Twitter.
Oh, aren't you nice?
Yeah, I when you start creating meaningful content, I'll follow you again, Brad.
Okay, that's John Combest. As you can tell, John is a little bit tight. I mean, he's got his, he's to the point where if you're driving down the highway and every once in a while you move within a foot of that right lane marker and the foot of that left lane marker, John's going to say, hey, stay in your damn lane. You don't have to cross over the markers. You just come close to him, and John's like, oh, you're not driving down the middle of the highway. That's John. He's like Mr. Straight Ahead.
It's
right?
a whole lot of free choice, Brad, and you can use these technologies any way you want to. I'm just glad that you figured out Teams, Brad. It's such a confusing technology that holds your hand as you log in. I can't believe you're able to figure it out.
John, I'm an old guy, and but the interesting thing is I do all sorts of technical stuff on a daily basis, okay? And I have increasingly, like when I talk about cars, I say things have gotten out of control to the point where you're making the car so incredibly complex. It's just to the point where it's like, it doesn't need to be that way. And remember, we talked about this with the car that Toyota has, actually the pickup truck, the Toyota Hilux Champ, which if it were imported in the United States and you adjusted the currency evaluations and all that kind of stuff, currency valuations, it would be selling for $12,000 in the United States. Why? It has no tech. It has no dashboard display and all that kind of stuff. It's just a basic truck that you can mount a 50 caliber machine gun in the bed of the truck and go as used as a tactical vehicle, but yet it doesn't have all the technical stuff. And see, I'm a techno guy, but it's like there's certain things you just over-engineer. It's the problem. Talk to any automotive guy right now. The cars not to buy, you know what the cars not to buy are?
I have no idea.
BMW and Mercedes. Do you know why?
Oh, and this is a great example of why A Block is called A Block, because it's supposed to be about autos. It's not about the top 3 stories, and that's why it's the most downloaded part of our show. A is for Auto Block, right, Brad?
No, A is for AI. That's what it's for. No, the reason is they've gotten so incredibly complex because German engineering, it's wonderful. Yeah, until something breaks and then nobody can fix it. Okay, that is John Combest. We've determined that. We've determined this guy right here. What's your name, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what do? I count down the AI top 3. Okay, the AI top 3 this morning. We'll start with this one.
In third place,
Brad, you do an excellent job describing story number 3. And I may lean on you to describe it once again. We have a news piece about this, a potential resolution in the dispute between cannabis companies and Missouri's counties and cities. two pieces that I have up today, one from Rebecca Rivas of the Missouri Independent, another from Rachel Lipman of St. Louis Public Radio, about the stacking of cannabis taxes. And Brad, you do a good job of explaining this, but let me take a crack at it, and then I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. In general, the dispute is whether or not Missouri's counties can levy a 3% tax on cannabis sales that's on top of the 6% Missouri sales tax, Missouri state tax, and then whether another municipality can come in and add another 3% on top of that. So in other words, let's say the municipality of Florissant in North St. Louis County, if you were buying cannabis there, a company could add 3% Florissant tax, a municipality could add 3% municipal tax on top of a 3% county tax, on top of a 6% Missouri state tax. Have I described that right? You do a good job when you talk through this, Brad.
Yes, there's only one complication to this, that is if the cannabis place is in an unincorporated area, then the county gets the 3% guarantee. That's the weird, sort of strange part of this.
I see what you're saying. That makes sense. And, Rebecca Rivas in her piece and Rachel Lipman in their piece both described what you just did, Brad, which is the county, for example, St. Louis County. If you're living in an unincorporated area, like the area that Brad and I grew up in, North St. Louis County, that's called Spanish Lake, which is not technically its own municipality, St. Louis County would levy a 3% sales tax on cannabis and any sale in that unincorporated area. So the dispute, Brad, that the Missouri Supreme Court heard yesterday was whether or not these municipalities can actually stack one tax on top of another. And the company that brought this lawsuit, a company called Robust Missouri 3 LLC, which is a cannabis company, says, look, you cannot have these municipalities stacking taxes on here. Obviously, these cannabis companies are going to hate it because incrementally, the more tax you raise on a product, in theory, a cannabis enthusiast might be less likely to purchase that cannabis if the tax was incrementally higher. So you and I have talked about this, Brad, since the beginning of our show 18 months ago. And finally, as Rebecca Rivas notes in her headline, this is a 2-year-old court case, and this is finally going to get resolved by the Missouri Supreme Court.
Now, the interesting thing about this is this makes St. Louis City very attractive, because if you buy your cannabis in the city, since it's not in a county, you're only paying the 3% muni tax. See what I'm saying?
Well, that's beautiful. And I mean, yeah, now you do pay a carjacking tax and you do pay a car window replacement tax as well.
This is not to beat a dead horse, but this is what happens when you have ballot initiatives. This stuff gets into the Constitution. It can't be modified. The legislature can't go back in and say, okay, there's a loophole we have to fix. It can't be done. And the thing to me about this is talking about greedy munis and counties and the state. It's all about the tax revenue. That's what it's about. It's not about anything other than that. John, let's be honest, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, of course it's about the money. Yeah. And so, I mean, here's the thing. If you're one of these companies, you're obviously going to be arguing for as much tax variance as possible. And I'm sure they have pretty good data from other states that shows the incremental drop off in sales once a tax rate reaches a certain amount.
But the sad part of this is what the governments on all levels, muni, county, and state don't realize is that while they're arguing over this, the illegal guys are saying, hey, no taxes at all when you buy from us. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah, they don't, and they don't offer a lot of receipts though, Brad. So it's been a full week since you've taken a shot at Dave Schatz. And so this would be a good time to point out what his plan is, Brad, for cannabis sales, right? Doesn't it have to do with receipts?
In Franklin County, if you buy cannabis in Franklin County, first off, you have to have fiber optic put in your house underground, and he has to install that. Secondly, you have to give him a receipt that you've had the fiber optic installed in your front yard underground. And third off, you have to essentially go to his house, cut his grass, then he'll think about giving your money back from the cannabis tax. That's what it is in Franklin County.
And the problem with you cutting his grass is you always set the mower blade too high, Brad. That's what I heard from your neighbors.
Here we go, John.
Now, let me tell you who set the bar way too high. A couple sports teams across the state. That's story number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
A story covered by several outlets. We'll refer primarily to the one from the progressive blog called the Missouri Independent. A guy named Jason Hancock put this together. Brad, a lot of times neophytes would look at a headline in the Post-Dispatch and think that it's coming from the Post-Dispatch. It's not. It's from the Missouri Independent. The headline is Kehoe's plan for Chiefs Royals Stadium funding derailed in the Missouri Senate. Now, first and foremost, as a primary source, I'll point people to yesterday's This Week in Missouri Politics midweek update, TWMP Daily. Scott Fawn had Senator Lincoln Hough from Springfield on, and Lincoln was hot. And I mean that not in a gay way. Lincoln was hot in an angry type of way. He had a few bones to pick with members of the Missouri House, Brad. And I'll tell you how that connects to the stadium here in a minute. Lincoln was upset because there was a specific capital funding bill called House Bill 19. Yes, it originated in the House. And the House refused to take up that spending bill last Thursday and Friday. You know, the legislature has a constitutional mandate to pass the budget by Friday at 6 p.m. And House leadership passed the budget, but without that particular spending bill. Lincoln Hough's argument is, why are we sitting here as a state with all this money in the bank, and instead of deploying it for important capital projects, hospitals, research centers, things that House members themselves ask for, House leadership decided to say, no, we're just not going to vote on that stuff. We're just going to pass the bare bones budget. Here's what it has to do with the stadium, Brad. Mike Kehoe had a plan that apparently his team just started distributing yesterday to some members of the House. I guess leadership in the House and the Senate got a few more hours to take a look at it. And the Kehoe plan was to help the Royals build a new stadium in the state of Missouri and would help the Chiefs pay for upgrades to Arrowhead Stadium. Now, what's unique about Lincoln's conversation with Scott, Lincoln's point is, how in the world are we as a state legislature not going to fund a new hospital in Pemiscot County, or not fund a new crime lab, or not fund Project X, Y, and Z, because we say, hey, we need to keep all this money in the bank. We don't need to spend any money. And then we're going to go and give these 100 millionaires, maybe billionaires, money to build a stadium. So that was Lincoln's beef with what was going on with the budget. And strangely, Brad, the Missouri House of Representatives, dominated by Republicans, passed the Kehoe Stadium plan by a vote of 108 to 40. One of the best quotes on this came from Mary Elizabeth Coleman. And she said, I don't know anybody who goes to the Missouri Senate or the Missouri legislature to pass special interest money for billionaires, but that's what we're being asked to do here. So I would say, Brad, the way that it appears from this coverage from Mr. Hancock and others across the state is that the stadium bill, the Royals and the Chiefs bill from Kehoe, is dead on arrival. It may have passed the House, but it's definitely not going to pass the Senate. This would appear to be, I want your thoughts on this, Brad, because this would appear to be what I think is the first miscalculation from the Kehoe team. What do you think about this, Brad?
John, you don't know what I think about this. First off, I've said this before. If we had women that ran our government, we wouldn't have these problems because the women would say, hey, you guys want to move to Kansas? Good luck. We don't care. We're not spending any money.
And we would just be subsidizing Ultas?
No.
And maybe some Sephoras, right, Brad?
No, the problem here is, I've said it before, people laugh at me, I know you laugh at me. The leaders here in St. Louis City and St. Louis County, even St. Charles County and Franklin County and Warren County. In Franklin County, there would be a deal that if they moved the Kansas City Chiefs and the Royals here to St. Louis, you could get your amusement tax back if you file your receipts with Dave Schatz. But that's a whole nother story. I'm the only guy that's ever said this. Move the teams here. We've got once upon a time, St. Louis was a big league town where we had the Browns.
Yeah, when we had a huge population, we were able to support 2 Major League Baseball teams. When our population was triple in the city what it was now, Brad. You've made that point many times. It's a great point.
But, John, the metro area is larger than it was back in the 40s and 50s. If you look at
It is. And, Brad, you've had a great idea of that we should move the teams here. We have the TWA Dome.
Right.
We have the ability to support these teams. Here's what I think has happened, Brad, and we've got 3 minutes left in this segment. What I think is happening here is that I think on the surface it looks like the Kehoe team messed up. It looks like they brought in this plan at the last minute, the last few days in the legislature. It's insulting to the legislature, etc. I don't think at all that's what's happened here. Mike Kehoe served in the Missouri Senate. He served as lieutenant governor. He knows you don't dump a plan on legislators with 3 or 4 days left and expect them to pass it. Mike Kehoe is doing the sales pitch known as anchoring. The idea of taking a big fat number at the beginning of a negotiation and dropping it on one side so that you start the conversation at that number. Kehoe, there's a chance, Brad, here's my asterisk. Maybe somebody on the Kehoe team was tasked with putting together a stadium plan and they kept kicking the can down the road and they failed at their mission and they're coming to the legislature late. I don't think that's what's happening. Mike Kehoe is putting out this big proposal that's too expensive right now so that next year or in a special session this fall, we have a place to start, a place to begin the negotiations. Just a first number, a first draft out there. Everybody listening to this has been in a situation at work where they wanted a project to happen and they didn't have every particular. So they dropped a first draft, a first proposal, a first pitch just to start the conversation. And I bet you that's what Mike Kehoe is doing in this.
While the leaders in St. Louis City and St. Louis County sit on their hands and do nothing. See, I just don't understand that. I mean, I don't understand it. You want to keep the team in Missouri? We got a stadium. We got a dome. Bring them east. Put them on I-70. Put the moving trucks. Matter of fact, if you know where they're at in Kansas City, they're right off I-70. Load them up. Head them east. They come into St. Louis right off I-70. They get off downtown. Unload. Done deal. Right, John?
Nah, I don't want Royals fans in St. Louis.
That would bring, see, here's the interesting thing. They talk about how, sports brings all these things downtown. Okay, instead of having 81 days of baseball activity in downtown St. Louis, you have 162 because when the Cardinals are out on the road, the Royals are playing at home. 162. Why isn't Kara Spencer jumping all over that? I don't get it. I don't understand.
I don't know. Because I think she's still fighting with Steve Ellman over who gets rights to the family arena. Everybody wants that place, Brad. No. And you know who else brought people together? The subject of story number 1.
The number 1.
Missourians and folks in Washington, D.C. today are mourning the passing of former Missouri Senator, former Missouri Governor, Kit Bond, who passed away yesterday at the age of 86. Top of my website today, and we only have a minute left, top of my website today, we have several stirring and meaningful remembrances of Kit Bond. Wrote a great piece. Ruth Keller from the Missouri Independent, who covered Kit for many years, wrote a piece. Scott Fawn wrote a touching tribute. And, he touched many of our lives, those of us who were involved in Missouri politics, who ever got a chance to be around Kit or be in his presence or learn anything from him. And he will be deeply missed. I couldn't do it, justice here in a minute, Brad, but I would just suggest folks pick out some of the pieces we have up today. Garrett Hawkins from Missouri Farm Bureau talks about the impact that Kit had on agriculture in the state of Missouri, and just a giant. And the cliche, Brad, if you had a Mount Rushmore of Missouri politics, I think you start with Kit Bond.
John, in segment B, I did a little research on Kit Bond, and in segment B, we'll pick that right up the beginning of the B block. I'm going to give you an interesting Missouri Supreme Court decision involving Kit Bond that both Bob Onder and Ricky Schroeder should take very close note of. Are you ready for this?
We've talked about this several times, Brad, and I'm glad that you're bringing it up again. I think it's a very unique Supreme Court decision. You're right.
Yes, and do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, we've talked about it several times on the air, and I mentioned it in the top 3 when we were talking about residency issues with Mike Hamra during the Democratic governor primary last summer.
Right. Okay. We'll pick that up in B block. And by the way, I still say he's gone now, but Kit made a tremendous mistake. The Highway 19 bridge out of Herman, they dedicated it to him. I still say he made a horrendous mistake when he should have. There was a very loved resident of Herman who died serving our country in the Army, I believe he was, and was a big football star there in Herman. And they named the bridge after Kit Bond, and not too long before that's happened, this guy was killed in action, I believe
and we've had several debates about that, Brad. You and I disagree about naming public institutions, bridges, buildings after elected officials. You and I disagree on that. And folks can go in our archives, which are now somehow at bjshow.us, and listen to the video.
Do you know why the reason for that is, John?
Because the domain expired.
No, I still have it. I'll explain that in the B segment. Okay, we're going to take a break.